So ContraPoints' newest video is one of the most frustrating and nonsensical things I have seen in a long fucking time. Wow, sorry, that just kind of slipped out. But yes, I did not like ContraPoints' newest video. And the weird thing is, it's not even like there are a large amount of factual inaccuracies in it. It's just primarily two specific sections that make the whole thing a frustrating experience. Although, maybe I'm being too harsh. After all, this video did see Contra solving transphobia through blocking J.K. Rowling on Twitter.
As for what to do about J.K. Rowling, honestly, let's all just block her. Open up Twitter right now, go to her profile, and just block her.
Honestly, when I first heard that, the only thing I could think of is,
cyberbullying isn't real, just turn off the fucking monitor.
Now, I could sit here and point out how central Rowling is of a figure in the modern transphobia movement. However, according to Contra, that's actually not the case. She's merely the devil of the movement against transphobia because of misogyny or something.
A movement can't get along without a devil. And across the whole political spectrum, there's a misogynistic tendency to choose a female devil. Whether it's Anita Bryant, Hillary Clinton, Marie Antoinette, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or J.K. Rowling.
I should note, by the way, I find it really fucking interesting that she essentially said the reason Anita Bryant was made a devil was because of misogyny, when within the first 10 minutes of this fucking video, she directly says that Bryant's homophobic campaigning directly resulted in other homophobic initiatives, both in her home state of Florida and nationwide.
And meanwhile, Anita's campaign inspired more anti-gay legislation, including bans on gay adoption and same-sex marriage, both of which passed in the Florida Senate, as well as the failed Briggs Initiative in California, which would have forced public schools to fire gay teachers. So Anita Bryant was worse than a bigot. She was an influential bigot.
But on the topic of misogyny, let's talk about the part about Vosh. The thing that by far caused the most online drama in this video.
I've always been happy to acknowledge that angry trans people on Twitter sometimes take things too far. Things like death threats or misogynistic insults, I don't support that, and I've called it out in the past. Like when the leftist streamer Vosh, drama alert, who is not trans.
Then why is he your example, given you introduced this topic by pointing out that trans people can sometimes take things too far?
Tweeted at J.K. Rowling, "Women be quieter and start apologizing" challenge.
Okay, two issues. First off, Vosh didn't actually tweet this at Rowling, as seen by the fact that he didn't at her in the tweets in question. But second off, I just want to talk about how fucking tasteless this is. You see, Contra is bringing this up to make the point that she does actually fight against bigoted sentiments in the movement for transgender rights, which she directly says right after this part.
The point I'm trying to make is, I have no qualms about calling out people on my side whenever they go too far or cross a line, or do stupid tweets and then mansplain to me about how I don't understand tactical misogyny. Idiot. But the same cannot be said of J.K. Rowling.
She contrasts this with Rowling, who does not call out such sentiments when they show up in her movement, with her example being Dennis Kavanaugh.
Dennis has also tweeted that he preferred AIDS to the trans movement. And also, quote, "I will fucking nail you to a wall what you have done to these innocent children. Your mutilation of these little humans because they were gay will be nothing compared to what I will do to you legally. You think you are ghouls? Wait till I deal with you, bastard, and I mean to." Dennis? It's time to log off, Gorge. I do wonder, does Dennis threatening to nail people to a wall count as illiberal methods? I guess J.K. Rowling doesn't think so because she's never condemned it. In fact, when Dennis's Twitter suspension ended, she was right there to welcome him back. And she continues to retweet him.
And I guess what I'm saying is I find it distasteful to go from talking about the extremes in one movement, aka a guy who said he preferred the AIDS epidemic, which killed 100,000 people from 1981 to 1990 alone, just in the United States, by the way, the transgender rights, and threatened to nail supporters of transgender rights against a fucking wall before segueing into hateful rhetoric in your own movement, with your example being a lightly misogynistic joke on Twitter, which, even if you don't find funny, hell, I don't even find it particularly funny, isn't comparable to the things Dennis Kavanaugh did. Structuring the video like this implies an equivalence that just doesn't exist. I'm sorry. And even though I'm far from under the impression that this was intentional, it at the very least feels like this wasn't thought through well enough.
I called him out, tweeting, "Doing edgy, ironic misogyny while defending trans people magnifies the grain of truth in what TERFs say about there being misogyny in trans activism."
You know what else magnifies that claim? Saying there's a grain of truth to it, you idiot. Furthermore, I want to talk about the wording of that tweet, how it magnifies the grain of truth. Because the problem with that is when TERFs discuss misogyny in the trans movement, they're talking about trans people existing. It's funny this video is about J.K. Rowling, given she called right now the most misogynistic period I've ever experienced, despite being 10 when her home country of the United Kingdom first allowed women to open bank accounts in their own names, and 27 when it became illegal for men to rape their wives. Fuck, one of the reasons why she used the pen name J.K. Rowling as opposed to her real first name of Joanne on the Harry Potter books was because her publisher assumed young boys wouldn't buy a book written by a woman. They're saying this because of gender theory and transgender people existing. And they're going to say the same things for the same reasons, regardless of if Vosh makes a joke on Twitter or something. I know I'm harping on this, but I just find the framing to be so fucking weird. And it's hard for me to not think about the framing, given Contra specifically said her viewers should understand framing earlier in the video.
Now, because you, viewers, are smart, media-literate people, you understand framing.
When I first heard this point, honestly, the first thing that came to mind was the scene in Back to the Future 3 where Marty was being intimidated by Mad Dog Tannen, and he just says, in reference to why he doesn't really care about said intimidation,
"He's an asshole. I don't care what Tannen says. And I don't care what anybody else says either."
TERFs are assholes, and we should not care about what they say, is my point.
I tweeted that because I recognize that if people who are claiming to speak for you are doing so in a misogynistic way, and if you let that slide, you're going to wake up one day to find that you're in a misogynistic movement. Of course, Vosh took the criticism really well, explaining that actually, I just didn't understand the complex tactical arguments for the moral necessity of being misogynistic to J.K. Rowling.
I assume you're referring to the top tweet when you say this, which wasn't in reference to the joke tweet itself. Vosh was saying this in response to you asking him why he was getting defensive in response to criticism from Cat Black, with him essentially saying that if you knew the entire situation, you would understand why he does not view this criticism as reasonable. This was because the tweet you were replying to, which started this discussion, was him making fun of a Twitter thread that Cat Black had posted on him, by saying you felt like he dismissed Cat Black's criticism of him when it sounded reasonable to you. He wasn't even saying you had to agree with him, just that there was a reason behind him dismissing Cat Black specifically, which he thought you didn't realize.
And then he accused me of cancel culturing him, while at the same time literally telling his followers to publicly shame me.
The more of you were in the replies being like, that's not what's happening right here. Like, this is necessary, okay? Publicly shame her into changing her mind on this.
Then bringing up my past struggle with addiction.
Move you off this site and into... I don't want to bring up the substance abuse.
He specifically said he wasn't bringing it up. I don't get the issue here. Especially given Vosh was going to make the point that you are currently, in his mind at least, engaging in behavior that not only have you previously denounced, but you have actively said is harmful to your mental health when others engaged in it in response to actions you did. Vosh's actual response tweet did contain this sentiment, however, did not make it as overt as he was originally considering because he felt doing so would be needlessly harsh and just in bad taste. You don't have to think it's a good point. Fuck, you can think it's incredibly tasteless. And Vosh agreed. That's why, after beginning to type this point out, he backspaced and reworded it to make it more tactful.
So that pretty much confirms to me that Vosh doesn't actually care about advocating for trans people and just uses trans rights as a pretext to act like a fucking dingus. I won't tell you to publicly shame him though, because unlike Vosh, I would never sink to that.
You say after quite literally publicly shaming him for his previous actions. I assume that's why you brought it up at least, given you specifically used it as an example of bad behavior, or behavior that you view as shameful. I should note that when I showed this video to my friend Hester before making it public, she made the point that Contra more than likely meant that her fans shouldn't publicly shame him. However, even ignoring the fact that it just doesn't make any sense to publicly shame somebody before telling others not to do the same, that is quite literally the definition of hypocrisy. But this also begs the question once again of why this was even brought up in the first place. The entire reason Contra even brought up the drama with Vosh, I thought, was to make the point that people do publicly shame people who engage in bad behavior despite them being in favor of transgender rights. But now she's saying that actually her fan base shouldn't call out this behavior when it comes up. Whose point are you trying to make here exactly? Anyway, that's all I want to cover, so final thoughts. This video isn't terrible in the most literal sense, especially given everything I didn't cover is actually pretty decent. However, the bad stuff is so bad that I cannot honestly like the video, if that makes sense. The video comes off as more than a little confused, and her random decision to attack Vosh just felt out of pocket at best. Good night, and good luck.